Well, why don't we start off, Gethin, by you telling us just a little bit about yourself and, generally speaking, a little bit about the journey that you've been on.
Okay, yeah, no problem at all. So, hi everybody. My name's Gethin Jones. I'm a 50-year-old man from the United Kingdom, and I suppose I've had an interesting life, is the best way to explain it. And I also it's a bit of a life of two halves. It sometimes feels like I've lived two lives in one go. But yeah, so I come from Portsmouth, which is a naval city on the south of England. And I probably didn't have the best of starts, So children's services were there from the day I was born because my mum came through children's homes in the care system. She was a single parent with four children, and she had some learning difficulties. And because of my mum's own experiences growing up as well, we didn't kind of get the real love, care, and nurture that we needed to be able to grow up as human beings. And I suppose because I didn't have the best of times within my home and in my childhood, it came out negatively in my behaviour. And from a very young age, I had lots of professionals and adults always telling me what it was that I was doing wrong, and then I was bad and I was naughty, and anything that went wrong, it was always my fault. And so my formative years, my childhood years were very uncomfortable, and because of my mum's learning difficulties and she wasn't able to articulate, and my intellect kind of caught up with hers quite quickly. So lots of violence came into the home from my mum, but also from boyfriends, partners as well. So yeah, it was a difficult time as a youngster. And then when I was about 9 years of age, within my home, I had my brother, and my brother was like he was my biggest support, really. We depended on each other. And one day I came home and they took my brother into children's homes, and on that day I lost the most important person in my life. And because of my whole experiences that was going on and how uncomfortable it was at home, I started to ask to be put into children's homes myself. And nobody really listened to me, and nobody asked the question why. And because of my behaviour and how things escalated, by the age of 11, I was taken into the care system for on a full-time care order. And that was also as well when I first sort of like got my first criminal conviction as well. I'd been sort of like shoplifting from local supermarkets and other stuff with kids on the estate. But it was the first time I got a criminal offence and went to court. And really my life just kind of like tumbled down a rabbit hole is the only way that I can kind of explain it. I wasn't reunited with my brother. We were kept separate because I found myself in a system that I truly didn't want to be within, but I had nowhere else to go. So I voted with my feet. So like from 12, 13 years of age, I was sleeping rough in towns and cities across the south of England. I was stealing more to kind of like fend for myself, so I just get my basic needs met, food, drink, other sorts of stuff. Because I was on the streets, I started to get involved in sort of like substances. So there was cannabis, sniffing solvents, glue, drinking alcohol, and just really getting pushed from pillar to post because the children's homes couldn't contain my behaviour. So they just moved me somewhere else. And I suppose really the most traumatic event, I'd kind of call it really, was when I got my first custodial sentence, and I was only 14 years of age. You had to be 14 before they locked you up. And 2 weeks after my 14th birthday, that's what they did. They locked me up into what was called detention centre. And the only way to explain that really, it was what they call short, sharp shock. We're going to scare you straight. And it was based on sort of like military training when people go into their basic training. So it was about fear, intimidation, violence, lots of like screaming and shouting at you, and as a 14-year-old child, it was just a horrendous place to be. And I can remember one night just like crying on my bed and having a blanket over my head. Yeah, and I just wanted someone just to come take me away, and no one came. And at that point in my life, something inside me broke. Something inside me said I was never going to trust another living soul. The only person I was going to depend upon was me, and I was no longer going to play your game. And I just went on then what I call a 20-year self-destruct. At the age of 14, I was in secure units. I was in secure units again at 15. I got my second custodial sentence at the age of 15. I called that the full stop on my childhood. I ended up spending 8 years of my adult life behind a prison wall. I developed a dependency on heroin. I spent time on the streets and in homeless hostels. And I destroyed every relationship that came my way because I never knew how to develop a meaningful, nurturing relationship growing up as a child. Whenever anybody came with me with any kind of love or care or kindness, I just kind of hurt them because I didn't know how to have that normal kind of relationship, if that's what you want to kind of call it. So I just at the age of I was 35. I was intravenous heroin user. I was injecting it into my neck. And my life was just broken, absolutely broken. And I just kind of like I remember just waking up one day and I just thought I can't live like this anymore. I just want to die every day. I just woke up and I wanted to die. And then, I met a lady called Jo Purdy, who I've known for many years and tried to support me all along the way. And literally, I was just walking down a road one day, and she just looked at me and she went, "Gethin, are you okay?" And I was just like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm all right." And she just looked at me in the eyes and she said, "Gethin," she said, "you're not okay. You need to book yourself in somewhere." And for the first time in my entire life, I not only just heard her words, but I trusted in what she said. And then on that moment as well, I saw that there was all of these other people around me that wanted to help me. What I needed to do was put in some action, engage with these people so I can live a different kind of life. And that was 16 years ago. And my life today is just a complete opposite of where I was then. So that's the story in a nutshell. And I'm really grateful to be on it, Joe. And I'm sure that you'll ask me questions to unpick some other bits within it. Okay.
Yeah, so much great stuff to unpack there. First off, thanks for sharing that with us. You talked about a lot of things, and the thing that literally just hit on me when you bumped into Joe on the street was you said, someone to trust in, which sounds like that was sort of a variable in your desistance process, having that trust. In your experience, Gethin, just broadly speaking, what works? What's working in our rehabilitation and reentry systems, and what's not working? I guess I could say.
Well, yeah, it's more about what's not working, because I said it in the webinar that you was there. There's a bloke called John Podmore, and he said, 80% of people in prison shouldn't be there. Yeah, and we should lock up people that we're scared of, not people that we're mad at. And the truth of the matter is our prison system is filled with people from the poorest parts of society. They got drug addictions, alcohol addictions, mental health addictions. And the truth of the matter is most of prison and rehabilitation is related to trying to reduce risk. That's going to mean that somebody's okay when they're outside. There's not enough therapeutic support within the whole of the system to be able to help and nurture somebody to make them changes. The way I always explain it to people, because people sometimes don't realise what desistance kind of means, and it's a complete shift in identity. Yeah, it'd be like me saying to you today, Joe. Yeah, it'd be like me saying to you, right, Joe, tomorrow you're not going to live this life anymore. And tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bag of drugs, yeah, and you're going to take that drugs to your local estate, and you're going to start to sell them drugs for a living. And then next week, you need to come and give me some money. And if you don't have that money, then there's going to be a consequence, and just and that's pretty much what it was, is that people used to say to me, "Oh, you need to change." And I used to think, but change into what? What do I change into? Because I'd always just been who I was. So yeah, so in my view, yeah, it's just not fit for purpose.
You know, it's great that you mentioned a different person. And again, from the desistance literature, we often hear talk of sort of that identity transformation that has to take place in addition to all the other changes. So, would you mind just sort of comparing and contrasting your old identity with what your current desisted identity looks like now, Gethin?
Yeah, yeah. So they use this in the system, and it's funny actually because I just created anyway. I'll call it like old me and new me. Yeah, and my old me was somebody that was scared, lost, angry, bitter. hateful, resentful, bitter, twisted, all of that sort of thing. Yeah, and it was just a ball of kind of like frustration. Yeah, and because that was my core. Yeah, then actually my whole physical self on the outside was why I was linked to drugs and crime and all of that sort of stuff. So this didn't fit in society. But inside of me, I always knew that I was good, and I always knew that I had a conscience because, sometimes when I do stuff, I still feel bad. And today, when I look at myself today, my day is full of love, care, kindness, compassion, understanding, empathy, support, selflessness. That's how I live my life today. Yeah, and that's the two complete ends. But what I always explain to people is actually, so even though today when you see me, you see this new me, old me's still there. Yeah, old me never goes. But what it is, I choose today to feed the new me. And then
Mhm.
because I feed the new me and with all of that goodness, I've got such a beautiful life. Yeah, I've got so many people that love and care for me. I've got have opportunities that just keep on coming, and it's just because the inside is different to what the inside was before.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You mentioned the webinar of yours, which I recently just attended, and one of the things that struck out for me, if you don't mind retelling it to our listeners, is you use bamboo, the analogy of bamboo, to kind of make your point about how. Well, I don't want to steal your story, but if you recall the bamboo analogy, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, because that was one that really landed on me, Gethin.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So for me, if I just explain when the journey first started, because I met Joe. I saw Joe on that day, which was in 2006. But 5 years before that was when I started to question who I was. And for the first time, I was put onto a drug treatment program in a Calderley prison in the United Kingdom. And I remember I had to go and listen to this person speak. Yeah, and when I first went in, I thought, "Who are you, mate? What do you know about my life?" Because I just had all of that stuff inside. And I remember him just sharing this story. And he talked about his life. When he talked about his life, I identified with it. And then he talked about this new life. And he talked about that he had a family, he had a home, he had a job, he had like people around him. He went on holidays. And I remember my jaw just hit the floor because I didn't think that stuff was possible. What I know today is what he did was he installed some hope. Yeah, and hope stands for, and I heard this from another prisoner that I'm working with in Leicester Prison. Hope stands for hearing other people's experiences, and that's what he did. Yeah, and for me, this is where the bamboo comes in. Yeah, so what happens with a bamboo? Okay, you plant the seed, yeah, and it goes into the ground. Then what it is that seed, yeah, needs some nurture throughout its journey. Okay, so whether that's sunlight, whether that's water, whether that's nutrients from the ground. Okay, and underneath the ground, there's the germination that's going along. Okay, so above ground, after I had that point, yeah, nobody would have seen any differences, but I was having all of these little different interventions. Okay, and then what happens with the bamboo is it takes 5 years before it kind of comes through the ground, and when it comes through the ground, it can grow a meter a day. And for me that was exactly the same as my journey. Yeah, it was a 5 year span. Yeah, and what it was I had all these people like Joe and other people that were giving me all of that nurture that I needed. Yeah, and then when the time was right on that day when I met Joe, I came through the ground and I haven't stopped growing since.
I love the analogy. I love the analogy. Um, Yeah, and again, I've talked about this on the podcast before that unfortunately in our correctional system, we take such a sort of binary pass fail approach. We're very risk averse, so any misstep by a client is viewed as failure. And as you just said, sometimes the practitioners don't understand all the germination, everything that's going on under the ground, waiting for that bamboo to sprout because it's just such impatience. Again, because of just
Yeah,
such a risk averse culture in the correctional system. Um, we also crossed paths during another webinar that featured the work of Dr. Sarah Lewis and Cam Stevens, who I've gotten to know over these last few months. Their webinar specifically highlighted the notion of what's known in the UK as service user involvement. We're still struggling here in the United States getting individuals not to use the word offender and use at least the word
yeah,
client. But I fell in love with service user involvement because, again, of the notion of actually involving the customer, so to speak. Um,
Yeah.
can you talk about what that concept of user involvement really entails? And again, with your lived experiences, the kind of difference that makes and the mistake we're making by not involving the service users and trying to turn their lives around.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a bit like when you just talked about the binary stuff, is like, yeah, because everyone is pass or fail, yeah. And
Hmm.
what I say, especially like when I was on my journey, yeah, because I was emotionally inapt, yeah. Actually, I was more like a child, yeah. And what it is when you teach a child, yeah, they're not always going to get it straight away. They'll have failures, okay. And I always say fail means first attempt in learning. Yeah, that's what fail is. First attempt in learning. And then what it is when we fail, we reflect, we review, and then we move on to what the next choice is going to kind of be. And that's where service user involvement comes in, really, because what it is, and we talk also about co-production. So we co-produce a service or rehabilitation programs which have both got the professional and the service user creating it together, so it's actually fit for purpose, and actually this concept has been widely used in the substance misuse world for a long time. There's lots and lots of service users that have actually come through the recovery programs and now work very high up within the recovery services. But I always say the reason why that happens, though, is because within the substance misuse world is they truly believe in recovery. Okay, so what I say to whether it's the Americans, whether it's Australia, or whether it's England, is actually, those in people in charge is, do you truly believe in rehabilitation? Yeah, because if you truly believe in rehabilitation, then you should be able to have somebody like me come in to support you to create something that's going to kind of work. I've been very, very fortunate in the UK. So at the moment, I'm a lived experience consultant for the redesign of probation within England and Wales. And it's probably the first time that it's been done at this level. And like literally, I'm sitting at the top table with the design team on how it is that the decisions they make are going to impact on both the probation officer and also the frontline staff, the service user. Because sometimes we make these really good decisions up here and we forget the impact it has down there. And the truth of the matter is, all rehabilitation, and this is what Sarah Lewis is really great about, it's about how to create human to human connections. Yeah, because people change people. And when we can kind of really get the service user voice, we can understand what it's like for the service user and how sometimes they mistrust the system. Yeah, and what it is the system can kind of do to start to help the service user see that they can trust the system and the system is there to help.
Yeah, I've been on a lot of design teams in my 30 plus years in corrections, Gethin, and I can tell you confidently I've never had somebody with lived experience on that design team, which again tells you how much we have to learn over here. Um, you mentioned your current endeavor. Let's talk about unlocking potential.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So yes, unlocking potential. It gave birth. It was just an idea, really. I've been doing this for 4.5 years. So what happened was I done really well in my professional career. So when I done that shift and change, when I first turned my life around, I had no qualifications and no education. Within a 7-year period, I educated myself to the equivalent of a degree and got an NVQ5 in leadership and management within children's social care. I also, as well, sort of went from 2 hours a week volunteering to 7 years later overseeing staff teams of 40, trying to support some of the most vulnerable groups in the city that I grew up within. And what happened was when I was kind of like this senior manager, and not many people knew about my past, only my main managers, because they had to understand it. I didn't share it with everybody else. And I can remember sometimes I'd have staff teams coming to me, staff members, and they'd be moaning about the service user. And when I'd be listening to them, I used to think, you're not wrong, but you're also not right. And then what would happen is I'd then have to see a service user because they'd be complaining about the staff member. And then when I used to listen to them, I used to think, you're not wrong, but you're also not right. The answer's somewhere in the middle. Um, so what unlocking potential kind of grew out of was literally I train and develop prison officers, social workers, substance misuse workers, homeless workers, anybody at all that works with the most vulnerable people within society. And what I try to do is I try to teach them is how they can start to create a human-to-human relationship with the person that they're supporting, because their professional identity is secondary. The human being is the binary. It's what you are. It's your natural, and it's no different to a service user. Yeah, they're first and foremost a human being. The rest of their identity is what they've created in relation to the choices and decisions they've made within their lives. So yeah, so that's kind of where unlocking potential came from. And then alongside of that, so when I work within prisons, I do work with staff teams. But then I also do work with residents, we call them in the UK, rather than prisoners, with the residents in about how they can learn to trust a system they fundamentally mistrust. Okay, and I've got a book called Unconscious Incarceration, and I call it Singing Nightingales. Yeah, so when I was trapped in my world of denial and hate and anger and bitterness, I never could see that there was anybody around that wanted to help me. Yeah, I couldn't hear the song of the singing nightingale. The day when I opened myself up to say, actually, I need some help, and actually these people can help me, people like Joe, all of a sudden I started to hear their sweet song, and my life just changed. And that's what I try to do with people that are trapped within the system, wherever that is.
I'm going to leave a link if it's available for that book of yours, Unconscious Incarceration.
Incarceration.
Right.
Yeah.
In addition to information around unlocking potential. Great work. Hey, what piece of advice would you give to a warden or a corrections director, someone who's really looking to make serious changes in how we do business? If you could bend their ear for 5 minutes, what would you say?
So the first thing I always say, yeah, is anyone can go to prison. Yeah, anyone can go to prison. Okay. So what you want to ask yourself, first of all, is if somebody that you knew, loved or cared for went to prison, what would you like that prison to look like? How would you like that person to be treated? Okay, and then that then gives you the core of what it is that you can do on a daily basis. The other thing that I always say to people, yeah, is because there is a lot of aggressive and sometimes bad behaviour. Yeah, and what I say, when you see that kind of behaviour, that frustration or whatever's going on with that person who's incarcerated, ask yourself, what has happened to this person that's making them act in this way? You know, and the analogy I always give it is like, if you have a dog that's been mistreated its whole life, if you put your hand out to that dog, it's going to come at you with snarling teeth. But if you keep going back to that dog with love, care, kindness, compassion and understanding, one day the dog will meet you with a wagging tail rather than snarling teeth. You know, so that's what I always kind of say, you know, anger meeting anger is just an explosion. But if you can meet anger with kindness, care and compassion, okay, it's going to make some changes. There's some kind of give there. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah, great advice. What do you think is one thing that the public gets wrong about prisons or our rehabilitation efforts?
Do you know what, right? I think COVID is a really, really good way for people to understand. Okay, so people think that people go to prison to get punished. Okay, but the punishment is the loss of liberty. It's being taken away from your community and your surroundings. Okay, and being incarcerated. That is the punishment. The true purpose of prison is about rehabilitation. That's the whole focus of what prison should be. We don't put people in prison to punish them more. The punishment is the loss of liberty. And due to COVID, everybody now knows what it feels like to lose your liberty. Yeah, everybody has felt that pain of being separated from their communities, their families, their loved ones, not being able to see the people that matter the most. So hopefully now people will see just what it's like for people that are being incarcerated for whatever they've done. So then, you know, and my thing then is like, you know, but they always say that we put people in prison to keep communities safe, okay? But the truth of the matter is, especially in the UK, I know it's less in America because you have some horrific sentences in my view, but, you know, the majority of people in prison in the UK are going to get out at some point. Okay, so actually, if we truly have rehabilitation as the main focus in custody, when they come out, then we're actually keeping communities safe because they've changed and they want to kind of do things differently. But if we just keep incarcerating people and then beating them with a stick, when they actually come out, they're going to be more angry than when they first went in. And actually, that's when the reoffending rates continue to go up. So if we can kind of just get the public to see actually prison and the loss of liberty as the punishment, and if all of us together can say that actually we need those in power to invest more in rehabilitation, then actually we're going to kind of really keep society safe.
That's a great message, which, like you said, unfortunately, most people can now relate to with COVID. But you're right. It's this misnotion that folks think once they get to prison, the punishment needs to be piled on even more. Whereas, as you just beautifully articulated, it's the loss of freedom that's the punishment, being away from your friends and your family and missing holidays, which again, a lot of people can relate to now. So I love that. I love that response. Gethin, any other big projects you've got coming up you'd like to plug? And or if you do, you're a friend of the show, so let me know and I can do so myself.
So COVID's been a very interesting time for me. Before this, I was travelling the length and breadth of England and going into lots of different prisons. I'll now mainly just sit on this sofa looking at screens. But it's opened up a whole new world. So I've started to work with some correctional prisons in Australia. And I've been working with prison staff members, so correctional officers, and also their version of probation officers, and kind of teaching them the same things that I really do in the UK. And I've also been doing some sort of some group sessions with prisoners in Australia as well. So it's just opened up more of what it is that I can do. But I'm also as well in the process of creating some e-learning training and on my website. And I'm going to have training sessions on there for professionals in relation to how it is that they can develop more meaningful relationships with those they serve and support. But there's also as well going to be some personal development stuff on there as well, which will be both for practitioners or prison officers, probation officers, whoever they are, but also as well clients. And that's about how it is that you can shift mindset. So if I just quickly say that the first book, Unconscious Incarceration, is based on the story of the Christmas Carol and Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay. And what I talk about is we've all got Scrooge behaviours that get in the way of us being the very best version of ourselves. And I've created three kind of characters. You've got the cabbie that makes you look back at your past life and what it is that you've done and how your behaviours were created. Then you've got the tour guide that makes you look at your today and where that Scrooge behaviour takes you and what the outcome looks like. And then you've got the time traveller that then shows you what your future will be like if you don't start to change these Scrooge behaviours. So that book is about shifting mindset. Yeah. So how it is we can shift the mindset and change behaviour. It's only a small book. It's only about 95 pages long. So that's going to be done into an e-learning program. But I've just published my second book, which is called How to Fuck Up and Still Succeed. Okay. The fuck is got a few stars in it, yeah. So you're not going to have a big profanity on the front page, front cover. But with that book, that's more about how it is that we put ourselves into action. So I always say we represent the 5 people we most hang around with. Yeah, and it's all about how we create and develop support networks, what it means to move into action. And I've got a little model which is called Think It, Say It, Do It. Because lots of us, we're always thinking about, we're going to do this, going to do that, going to do this, going to do that. And then our heads will talk ourselves out of it, so we don't always do it. Then you've got other people that are always saying it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But actually, they never do anything. Yeah, so what I've done is I've created this little program which is about you think it, you then share it with that network of people that want to help and support you. They then give you suggestions of what you do, and then you get on and do that. And then what it is, you then see what the next step is after that. So that's kind of what it is that I'm doing at the moment. Because, part of my ethos of being as well is not just about people in prison. Yeah, there's people in mental prisons all across the world. Yeah, so what it is I'm looking to unlock everybody's potential, whether you're a practitioner, a client, or just a mum or a dad or somebody else that's just struggling and needs a little bit of a push in life.
You are an inspiring individual, Gethin. You've got a lot on the horizon. I hope that means you'll come back and give us an update at some point down the road. It's been a pleasure talking to you, sir.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope one day to be able to come to the States if they let me in.
Well, fingers crossed. I would like to meet you face to face versus over a screen, as you noted. So we'll shoot for that approach goal, as we say. Gethin, I can't
Brilliant.
thank you enough, and I will again leave a link to as much of your material as I can find in the episode description of this podcast, so folks can endeavor to learn more about Gethin Jones. Thank you, sir. Be well. Hope to talk soon.
Thank, thank you very much, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.